The archetype of this beautiful energy is the sorceress. She is aware. She's creative. She is spiritual. She loves chaos and she thrives in it. There's destruction, but destruction for transformation, death and rebirth. The sorceress has great intuition. She's seductive, which is different to being the seductress. Because being seductive can be a great experience for everyone involved. It can be fun, it can be a game in a positive way. Welcome to Empower and Evolve, the vortex of growth that you have been looking for. I am your host, Kat Tannyberg. I'm a mindset coach for female leaders, and I am committed to helping you cultivate the mindset shifts that generate you wild success. Each episode, we explore ways to tap into your true potential. We face the shadows that hold you back, and we embrace the journey toward your most abundant life. If you love what you learn here today, then I invite you to share this episode with someone that needs to hear it. Right, it's time to plunge in. Hello, my love, and welcome to this episode of the Empower and Evolve podcast, where I give you a little bit of an introduction to the dark feminine. When I got my notes together and started to get ready to record this podcast, I looked at my outfit and I was like, should I get changed? Should I get changed to be more in a frame that fits the dark feminine? And I often like to do this. I often like to use the way I dress to tap into different archetypes and different energies. And today I was like, nah, I can't be asked. Because it's not just about looks or the visuals, but it's really about the energy that you can tap into. So today we're going to explore the energetic power of the dark feminine. Oh, I have goosebumps even just thinking about it. The dark feminine. This is an archetypal energy that is available in every single one of us. No matter our gender, no matter our background, no matter our gender identity, this is an archetypal energy that is available in every single one of us. And this energy is extremely powerful. The dark feminine is very compelling, yet often misunderstood. And if we think about, don't worry, I'll introduce you to the characteristics of the dark feminine shortly. However, if we think about society and how society perceives the feminine energy, society often agrees with and approves of the light feminine, which I believe should probably be another podcast episode on its own. But the dark feminine is often those characteristics that are often misunderstood, depicted in the wrong way, can be seen as chaos and destruction, and not always maybe as transformation, power, and depth, which is also available in the dark feminine. And it's often these energies that women, for instance, who spend most of the time here in this energy are misunderstood for. So first of all, I want to introduce you to another metaphor. I have quite a few metaphors that I like to use when it comes to introducing you to the feminine and masculine archetypal energies, considering we need both in order to be truly in balance. But this is more of a metaphor to teach you about the archetypal energies of the feminine and masculine. And this metaphor maybe includes more of the dark feminine energy in it. And this metaphor is actually the concept that the woman, the female, the feminine is the ocean. And the ocean can be calm and beautiful, but she can also be raging and destructive. And the masculine is the rock that is within the ocean. So it's the role of the masculine to show up as the rock, no matter how the feminine shows up that day. And the men, and this is more like relationship stuff now, but the men that can truly show up in that way day in and day out and hold the frame of the rock and just let the feminine wash over them, no matter how she might show up that day, those are the most powerful and attractive masculine men. Because the feminine is unpredictable. And we do have our own cycle. We don't just have a 24-hour cycle like men. We have a 28-day cycle. And depending on where we're at in that cycle, we show up differently. So we're very nuanced. We have different faces. We have a lot of depth to us. And the more we can really accept ourselves and the other feminine characters around us, the more we'll be able to really tap into all energies of the feminine, including the dark feminine. Are you excited to learn about this? Because understanding and making sense of the dark feminine is really crucial for everyone, because it teaches us about balance, it teaches us about strength, and it teaches us about the integration of our full selves. Okay. First of all, I want to introduce you to the juvenile aspect of the dark feminine. This is when we are starting to tap into the dark feminine energy, yet we're not fully integrated in it. And as you know, I like to use archetypes for everything. So the archetype of the juvenile dark feminine is the crazy bitch. I'm sure we've all experienced her at some point in our life. Maybe we've even been her. I know I certainly have. So the crazy bitch gets away with things. She crosses boundaries emotionally. She is overwhelmed by her own emotions. She doesn't know how to handle them or move through them or experience them or feel them. She's the seductress. So that cougar energy, you know, where you like wrap people around your thumb, that kind of energy, the seductress. She's manipulative. She's controlling. She's really great at emotional dumping and abuse. And her favorite little mantra is, I want it, give it to me. And if you think about this, this is often the type of energies that women get negatively portrayed for. And I have to remind you that men can also show juvenile dark feminine energy. Anyone can. It doesn't matter what your gender is. You can have these. So if you were just listening to that list and you were like, oh shit, that's me, then it's okay. It's okay. We've all had times when we have shown up in ways where we haven't been proud of ourselves and shown up, you know, and later regretted the way we've shown up. And the more that we can truly, truly accept these parts of ourselves and recognize that we're just having a human experience, the more we will actually be able to integrate these lessons and turn them into, oh my God, what's the word that I'm looking for? Wisdom. So now, let me introduce you to the integrated dark feminine. The archetype of this beautiful energy is the sorceress. She is aware. She's creative. She is spiritual. She loves chaos and she thrives in it. There's destruction, but destruction for transformation, death and rebirth. The sorceress has great intuition. She's seductive, which is different to being the seductress. Because being seductive can be a great experience for everyone involved. It can be fun. It can be a game in a positive way. The dark feminine is also the energy of womb magic. Knowing that the womb is the portal to call in spirit. And if you think about that, it means like we can call in anything. So anything womb magic related lives in the dark feminine. The dark feminine is also opportunistic. And she uses the void, which means that she creates in nothingness. Because in order for the most beautiful creations to be born, they need to be created from nothing, from a place of an equal playing field where nothing has yet been created. It's just this blank canvas. She is cunning and she gets what she wants. So these are extremely, extremely powerful qualities, I'm sure you can see. And the further I have been on my journey of reclaiming the connection to my feminine, reclaiming the connection to my spirituality, reclaiming who I truly am, the more I've been down this journey, the more I have made friends with the dark feminine. And I actually spend a lot of my time in here, especially when it comes to business, showing up on social media, being on calls, hosting coaching calls. I love to be in this energy because I know how powerful she can be. Sometimes I use this energy in my marriage as well, but I like to predominantly drop into the light feminine when I'm with my husband because that allows him to step into his dark masculine, which is a topic for a whole different podcast. But I love to spend a lot of time in this dark feminine energy. And I recently had some really interesting conversations. So like I mentioned with this list, the dark feminine is powerful. She's seductive. She is confident. She just holds power and she oozes power. And you can tell that from who she is. And the more I have been in this energy myself in my day-to-day, the more I have noticed some really interesting observations. And I brought these observations to someone else who, when I attended and assisted at the master practitioner training in Australia, she also spends a lot of time in her dark feminine energy. And me and her clicked straight away. Like we just have a lot of similarities. Both very strong, powerful women. And we had some really interesting conversations around this. And mainly because I started to notice, especially in the first few days when the group cohort just entered the training and, they hadn't really started to change work yet and they hadn't had their personal breakthroughs yet. I noticed that out of the group, I got along the best with the men. And it almost seemed like the women were afraid of me. And I could feel that energetically. I can tap into a lot of things energetically, especially with recently, like, the more I've been kind of down the rabbit hole of really trusting my intuition and opening myself up energetically and, really recognizing that we are all one. I can feel energy, and I could feel that there was a distance between me and a lot of the women in the cohort. And this changed as we went through, because also once I recognized it, I was like, oh, okay, well, let me change my energy a little bit to make them more comfortable, because you can actually do that. Because we can move through all 4 quadrants. We can move through the dark feminine, the light masculine, the dark masculine. We can move through all of them. And in the most divine expression of both the feminine and masculine, we actually move through all 4 quadrants easily. So I had this conversation with this other beautiful woman, and I mentioned to her, like, oh, I've noticed that this time I'm really getting along better with the men. Like, I feel like I have more rapport and connection with the men. And I am noticing that there's a bit of a distance with the females. And I said to her, I wonder if this is because I spend so much time in the dark feminine. And she was like, of course it is. Because the thing with the dark feminine is she can be very attractive, but she can also be very repelling, especially to someone who may have not yet made friends with their own dark feminine. Because it can almost seem scary. So those themes of like transformation and destruction can come up, but people can be, and this is mostly playing out unconsciously, right? Unconsciously be afraid of that energy. And I was like, oh, that's so curious. And, we had this conversation with this other woman, and we were like, yeah, this is really fascinating to observe. So it's almost like when we have still wounded parts of ourselves that aren't fully comfortable with all of the feminine expressions of ourselves, then we might repel someone who is spending a lot of time in the dark feminine because it's too confronting. And this is with anything, right? Like when we haven't healed something within ourselves yet, someone else who embodies this can be deeply, quote unquote, triggering. And I also reflected back on the year before when I was attending the training as a student. And at that point, I hadn't really made friends with my dark feminine yet. I definitely started to make friends with my light feminine. I was pretty embodied in that energy, but the dark feminine was not something I was tapped into. And being in that cohort last year, I noticed that I wasn't getting along as well with the men, at least at the beginning. Again, things started to shift as the training went through. And now reflecting back, I'm like, oh, that's so curious, because the dark feminine, when she's really embodied, can feel really attractive, and not just in a sexual way, but just attractive in the like curiosity way to men. So yeah, I wanted to share this personal experience with you to kind of get you to start to notice the different women that you see in your life and how comfortable you may feel around them and how they show up. And I want to introduce you to 2 beautiful goddesses that are embodiments of the dark feminine. And I really feel like when I introduce you to these 2 goddesses, and I have worked with both of them in my life, and I have used them in the Unleashed container, and the women in that container felt really connected to them, especially once I introduced them to them. And I know that some of the girls from that container are still working with these goddesses and drawing on their energy when they need them. So I figured it would be great to pull them into this chat today. And those 2 goddesses are Kali and Lilith. So first, I'd like to introduce you to Kali, who is a powerful Hindu goddess who is associated with time, change, and destruction. And she's often depicted as this really fearsome expression of a feminine, and has this garland of skulls that hangs around her neck. And in Western communities, we often perceive destruction as something that is negative. In the Hindu traditions, it's different. And especially when we rely on Kali, because Kali's role is really essential for rebirth and transformation, because she teaches us that life's transformative cycles often begin with the end of something old to make space for something new. So something has to die in order for something to be reborn. That is transformation. And Kali is often seen not only as the destroyer, but also the protector, because she guards us against the ego and the illusions that bind us. And she challenges us to face our fears, to embrace change, and to seek truth beyond the superficial layers of existence. So when we start to work with Kali, we actually confront the necessity of chaos and the liberation that it can bring. And remember, the dark feminine thrives in chaos. And when we can start to really embrace the necessity of chaos and the liberation that it brings, it actually urges us to let go of what no longer serves us and embrace the potential of what might come from that death and rebirth. So she's a really powerful goddess to lean into during a time when you might feel like your whole life is falling apart. Everything is in shambles. And it might be this feeling of, I can't handle this. It's in these moments that we can really lean on Kali and remind ourselves that in death lies rebirth. In letting go of something that no longer works, we make space for something new. I love Kali. When she enters us in our life, when it can feel intense. It can feel really intense because she really makes us face parts of ourselves that we may have not even explored yet. And then there's Lilith. Lilith is the embodiment of sovereignty, being sovereign, and authenticity. And her origins trace back to ancient Mesopotamian myths. But she's most famously known as, from Jewish folklore, as the first wife of Adam, who refused to be subservient and who chose exile over submission. So powerful. She's my favorite. Currently in my life, at least. Currently, I love working a lot with Lilith. Besides Isis, who deserves a whole episode on her own. It's a different story. But Lilith really embodies the spirit of independence, equality, and authenticity. She represents the connection of, she represents the dark feminine through her connection to the night, through her connection to her assertiveness, and her unwavering commitment to autonomy. All traits of the dark feminine. And Lilith challenges societal norms that dictate submissive roles for women, which might be more the roles of the light feminine. And instead, Lilith advocates for personal sovereignty and freedom. And her story encourages us to explore our own paths, advocate for our own truths, for our own desires, and let go of the fear of judgment or ostracization. Ostracization means basically the fear of abandonment or rejection, which sometimes we can be afraid of if we truly step into our authenticity and our own power and own all of us, even the parts of us that we might in the past have been ashamed of. That's when sometimes we can have that fear of being left behind come up. And that's often why we hold back from sharing our truth and being all of us. And in a way, it's a protective mechanism to make sure that we stay part of the community, part of the group, which keeps us in a way safe. And yet, until we can truly show ourselves authentically and own all of us, we're never going to be able to call in our true community. Because in order to attract, we also have to repel. And this is where we can really lean on Lilith and recognize that in order for us to attract our true community, we have to repel those that aren't right for us. Letting go of something that no longer serves to make space for something new. There's the intersection between Kali and Lilith. So Lilith really reminds us of the strength of standing alone. She reminds of the power of the untamed nature and the importance of being true to ourselves. Lilith is also, in my opinion, the queen of shadow work, as is Kali, to be honest. So it's really learning to embrace all parts of us and recognize that in order to be light, there has to be a shadow. So if you've ever heard about shadow work and people saying like, oh, we have to get rid of the shadows, like, I don't believe in that. I actually believe that true shadow work is learning to love your shadows, except if love is a bit too far-fetched, accept them, embrace them, recognize your humanness, and really accept all parts of you, which I feel like this year has been, for me, is really learning to accept my shadows, accept who I am. And this is probably why this year I have become so comfortable with really tapping into my dark feminine. Because I've learned to love myself for all of me. And I've learned to see the importance of the death and rebirth cycle of destruction in order to be transformed. It's all been part of the journey for me. And I can see why as a society we don't want to connect with the dark feminine, because again, when we become sovereign, we can no longer be shoved into a box, and we will no longer give in to things that don't feel right for us. And when we own these qualities, it's really hard to make us fit into a system. And when we don't fit into the system, we're not useful to the system. And this is why it's one of the most rebellious acts to really learn to love your dark feminine. So I really hope that this podcast episode has inspired you to start to lean into your dark feminine. And, ways that you can do that include shadow work. I love doing shadow work with my clients. Maybe you need to book a call with me so that we can truly start to explore your shadows. And you can do different meditation practices, different rituals to connect to the goddesses, different rituals to connect to your own creative energy. Writing, journaling, anything creative, because creative energy also lives in the dark feminine. So the more that you can tap into those ways, and also really that self-acceptance piece, so mirror work and learning to see those parts of you that you may have been ashamed of in the past and really accept them. Like those can be beautiful ways for you to tap into your dark feminine. And if you have really loved this episode. I encourage you to share it on your socials. And if you've had some big aha moments, I invite you to send me a message on Instagram at It's Coach Kat. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear some of your realizations around the dark feminine, and maybe even if you've been falling into the juvenile aspects of it. If this is an energy that you feel very comfortable with, tell me about it. Message me. I'd love to hear from you. I'll catch you next week. Bye. Thank you for joining me on the Empower and Evolve podcast. I hope that today's episode has sparked a new insight, or perhaps reminded you of your own power to manifest change. If you found value in our time together, I invite you to subscribe and share this podcast with someone who might need a little reminder of their own magical power. It would mean the world to me if you could take just 2 minutes to review the podcast and help it reach more people. And remember, the journey of transformation is ongoing, and sometimes the most powerful step that we can take is to simply pause, breathe, and realign with our deepest intention. Until next time.